If you had all the money, power, and wisdom in the world, would you finally be happy? King Solomon reached the absolute peak of human achievement, yet his final words were so haunting, they sent me into a 3-month depression. He didn't leave behind a map to more wealth. He left 7 secrets on how to stop wasting your life on things that are nothing more than smoke. Today, we're deconstructing the life of a man who had everything, only to realize that the very things we're all chasing might be the things killing us. Now try to put yourself in Solomon's shoes for a moment. He's about 20 years old, barely more than a kid, and his father, King David, is dying. Now you have to understand, King David wasn't just some ordinary ruler. He was the giant slayer, the hero, the man who turned Israel into a superpower. Imagine the pressure of following a father like that. Most of us feel stressed just trying to live up to our parents' expectations, or trying to look successful on Instagram. But Solomon was inheriting a literal empire. He was stepping into a spotlight that was bright enough to burn him. Before King David passed away, he officially crowned Solomon as the new king. And while that sounds like a dream come true, for a 20-year-old, it was likely a nightmare of anxiety. How do you lead millions of people when you barely figured out who you are? The first thing Solomon did was make a massive statement of humility. The Bible tells us he sacrificed 1,000 animals as an offering of worship to God. Now don't get caught up in the ritual itself. Look at the heart behind it. This was Solomon saying, "I am in way over my head." He was surrendering his ego before the weight of the crown could crush it. And that's where the moment happened. The moment that would define the rest of his life. That night, God appeared to Solomon in a dream and basically handed him a blank check. God said, "Ask, what shall I give you?" Just think of that for a second. If the creator of billions of galaxies appeared to you tonight and told you that you could have anything you wanted, what would your first thought be? Be honest with yourself. Would you ask for $1 billion? Would you ask to be the most famous person on earth? Or maybe you'd ask for your enemies to finally lose everything. I'm embarrassed to admit it, but if I were in Solomon's shoes, I probably would have asked for a palace that made my father's look like a shed. But Solomon did something that shocked the ancient world. He didn't ask for fame, he didn't ask for a long life, and he didn't ask for more money. Instead, he told God, "I'm just a little child. I don't know how to lead. Give me the wisdom to understand justice and to lead your people." It was a completely selfless request. Solomon realized something that most of us forget. Power without wisdom is just a fast track to disaster. God was so pleased with his heart that he didn't just give Solomon wisdom, he gave him superhuman, mind-bending insight that the world had never seen before. But here's the crazy part. God also gave him everything he didn't ask for: riches, honor, and a level of respect that made him a global superstar. Almost overnight, Solomon became the most famous man on the planet. People traveled from Egypt, Assyria, and the farthest reaches of the earth just to stay on his good side and catch a glimpse of his brilliance. He was the smartest, wealthiest, and most powerful man to ever live. He became the ultimate icon, the man who had figured it all out. But as we're about to see, this perfect life was actually the beginning of a tragedy that very few people talk of. Because while Solomon was gaining the whole world, he was starting to notice something dark underneath the surface. He was about to discover a secret of wisdom that most people spend their entire lives trying to ignore. And if you've ever felt like the more you know, the sadder you get, you're about to find out exactly why. So imagine being Solomon for a second. You have the ultimate superpower. Your brain is working at a level no one else can even comprehend. You can solve any riddle, settle any dispute, and understand the secrets of nature. You're at the absolute top of the mountain. But this is where the story takes a turn you probably wouldn't expect. Most of us think that if we were just a bit smarter, or if we understood the system better, we'd finally be happy. We spend our lives chasing more degrees, more information, and more hacks to get ahead. But Solomon's first discovery, his first secret to not wasting your life, is a total gut punch. He says, "For in much wisdom is much grief, and he who increases knowledge increases sorrow." Now think about that for a second. He's saying that the smarter you get, the sadder you become. It sounds completely backward, right? But here is why he said it. And honestly, it's a realization that sent me into a dark place when I first understood it. When Solomon used his superhuman wisdom to look at the world, he didn't just see the beauty, he saw the cracks. He saw the crooked things that no amount of human effort could ever make straight. He looked at the way people treat each other, the way the poor are oppressed, and the way life is often just plain unfair. He realized that even with all the wisdom in the universe, he couldn't fix the fundamental brokenness of human nature. Have you ever felt that? Maybe you're someone who pays a lot of attention to what's happening in the world. You see the wars on the news, the poverty in your own city, or the way the environment is changing, and you feel this crushing weight of helplessness. We have more technology and more information at our fingertips than any generation in history, yet we feel more anxious than ever. Why? Because we can see all the problems, but we realize we don't have the power to fix them. Solomon calls this striving after the wind. Imagine standing on a beach and trying to grab the wind with your bare hands. You can feel it, you know it's there, but no matter how hard you squeeze, your hands stay empty. That is what it feels like when you try to use your own intelligence to fix a world that is inherently bent. This leads us to his second secret, and this one is even harder to hear. Solomon realized that for all his wisdom, he was still just a man. He said that what is lacking cannot be numbered. He realized there are dark voids in this life, gaps in justice, gaps in understanding, gaps in our own hearts that human logic simply cannot fill. Think about our modern world. We've mapped the human genome, we've sent rovers to Mars, and we have AI that can write poetry. But we still haven't solved loneliness. We still haven't solved greed. We still haven't solved the fact that no matter how much we know, we still feel like something is missing. Solomon's secret number 2 is that your intellect is not your savior. If you spend your whole life thinking that just a little more knowledge will solve your inner emptiness, you are chasing a ghost. Every time Solomon's knowledge increased, so did his grief. Because he was seeing the world for what it truly was, a place that is beautiful, yes, but also deeply, tragically broken. He realized that wisdom on its own only gives you a front row seat to the tragedy. It doesn't give you the power to change the ending. Now I know what you're thinking. This is incredibly depressing. Why am I even watching this? But listen closely. Solomon isn't telling you this to make you give up. He's telling you this so you stop looking for ultimate meaning in the wrong place. He wants you to stop putting the weight of your happiness on your own ability to figure it all out. If wisdom can't fix the world, and if being the smartest person in the room only makes you the saddest, then what is the point? Well, Solomon didn't stop there. He decided that if he couldn't think his way into happiness, maybe he could build his way there. He decided to use his wisdom to create the most incredible, luxurious life any human has ever seen. But as you're about to find out, that path led him to an even stranger discovery, a word that changes everything about how we see our reality. And that word is Hevel. If you've ever opened a Bible and read the book of Ecclesiastes, you've probably seen the word vanity or meaningless repeated over and over again. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. But here's the thing, that translation is actually kind of terrible. It makes it sound like Solomon was just a grumpy old man who hated everything. But the original word Solomon used, the word he repeated 38 times throughout his reflections, is the Hebrew word Hevel. And listen closely because this word right here, it changed everything for me. In Hebrew, Hevel literally means smoke, vapor, or breath. Think about your breath on a cold winter morning. You see it for a split second, it looks thick and real, and then poof, it's gone. You can't grab it, You can't put it in a box and keep it for later. It's there, but it's ungraspable. But there's a deeper, darker secret hidden in this word that blew my mind when I first learned it. Do you know who else was named Hevel? It's the name of the very first person in the Bible to ever die, Abel. Remember the story of Cain and Abel? In the original Hebrew text, Abel's name is Hevel. Just think about the symbolism there for a second. Abel was the good son, the righteous one, and yet his life was cut short in a sudden moment of violence. He was like a puff of smoke, here 1 second, gone the next. By using this word, Solomon isn't saying that life is trash or that your work doesn't matter. He's saying that life is incredibly temporary and, most importantly, impossible to control. Now just stop and look at your own life through this lens for a moment. Think about that promotion you're killing yourself for, or that certain number of followers you're trying to hit, or even that perfect body you're trying to build at the gym. Solomon says all of it is Hevel. It's like smoke. It looks solid from a distance. It looks like something you can build your entire identity on. But the moment you try to wrap your fingers around it to find permanent security, it vanishes. It leaves your hands empty. If you've ever reached a huge goal, maybe you finally graduated, or you got the house you always wanted, and you felt that weird, hollow, "Is this it?" feeling just 5 minutes later, that's because you were trying to grab the smoke. You were trying to find something solid in something that was designed by God to be a vapor. But here is the secret that most people miss, and it's the reason why I'm not depressed anymore when I read this. Just because something is smoke doesn't mean it's bad. Think about a beautiful sunset, or the sound of your child laughing, or the smell of fresh coffee in the morning. They are fleeting, right? They don't last. But that's exactly what makes them beautiful. Solomon is trying to shift your entire perspective. He's saying, stop trying to own the smoke. Stop trying to make the temporary things of this world permanent. When we treat life as something we can master and control, we end up frustrated, sick, and angry. But when we accept that life is Hevel, a gift that passes through our hands like a gentle mist, we can finally start to enjoy it for what it is. This is the third secret to not wasting your life. Stop trying to untang, to bend the world to your will. Accept the mist. Enjoy the breath while you have it. Because the moment you realize you can't control the wind, you stop exhausting yourself trying to catch it. You stop fighting the reality of your own limitations. But here's the crazy part. Even though Solomon understood this, even so though he literally wrote the book on why chasing wealth is like chasing smoke, he still went out and built the most expensive, most extravagant kingdom in history. He built massive palaces, gold-lined temples, and cities that were the envy of the entire ancient world. Why would the man who called everything smoke spend his life building towers of stone? Well, it turns out that even the wisest man in the world can fall into a trap that we still fall into today. We see it in the skyscrapers of Dubai and the massive headquarters of Silicon Valley. It's a paradox that almost destroyed Solomon, and it's the same one that might be keeping you stuck in a cycle of burnout right now. Let's look at what Solomon built and why he ended up hating every single stone of it. So, Solomon had the wisdom, he had the answers, but then he decided to do what most of us would do if we had an unlimited bank account. He started building. He spent 7 years building a magnificent temple for God, which was incredible. But then he spent 13 years building a palace for himself that was twice as big. We're talking about gold-lined walls, ivory thrones, and gardens that look like something out of a fantasy novel. If Solomon could dream it, he built it. And you have to realize it wasn't just about the buildings. It was about what those buildings represented. It was about status. It was about being the guy that everyone looked up to. People traveled from the ends of the earth just to sit at his table and tell him how amazing he was. He was the ultimate influencer before social media even existed. Every world leader wanted to be him, and every citizen wanted to be near him. But here's the haunting part. At the end of his life, Solomon looked at these massive stone towers and the mountain of gold he had collected, and he said something that sounds almost ungrateful. He said, "I hated all my labor which I had toiled under the sun." Think about that for a second. The man who had the most successful career in human history looked at his achievements and felt a deep sense of loathing. Why? Because he realized that no matter how high he built his towers, he was still standing in them alone. He realized that the respect people gave him was often just a mask for what they wanted from him. And worst of all, he realized that one day he would die, and everything he worked for would be handed over to someone else. Someone who might be a complete fool and tear it all down in a week. Does that sound familiar? We live in a culture that is obsessed with building our empire. We're told that if we just get that promotion, or if we finally hit a certain number of followers, or if we buy that house in the right neighborhood, then we'll finally feel like we've arrived. We chase status like it's the cure for our soul's hunger. But I want to share a perspective that might change the way you look at your job tomorrow morning. You see, this success trap didn't die with Solomon. It's alive and well in the offices of Silicon Valley and the boardrooms of the world's biggest companies. Have you ever wondered why some of the most powerful tech billionaires today, like Jensen Huang of NVIDIA or Jeff Bezos, constantly talk about humility or having a day one mentality? It's because they've tasted the same air Solomon did. Solomon was essentially the first CEO to experience the success trap. Many of us look at a company like NVIDIA, a multi-trillion-dollar giant, and we think, if I had just 1% of that success, I'd be happy forever. But look at the history. Jensen Huang didn't get there by just being smart or lucky. He actually had to go through seasons of absolute failure. He had to humble himself, admit he was wrong, and literally beg for investment from a competitor just to keep his dream alive. The secret Solomon eventually learned, and the secret these modern-day leaders often hint at, is that true wisdom isn't about accumulating more stuff or more status. It's about the ability to let go of your ego to see the truth. The most successful people in our world today realize that business, money, and fame are all Hevel. They are smoke. They can vanish in a single stock market crash or a single scandal. If you are working just for the reward, the title, the paycheck, the shiny trophy, you are building your life on a foundation of mist. But if you work for the value you provide, for the service to others, and for a purpose higher than yourself, then the work itself becomes the reward. This is Solomon's fourth secret to not wasting your life. He says that the best thing a person can do is to simply enjoy their work as a gift from God. Imagine a friend goes through the trouble of buying you a beautiful gift, and the second you open it, you toss it aside and ask, "Okay, what else do you have for me?" That's exactly what we do to God when we refuse to find joy in where we are right now. We're so distracted by the tower we want to build that we forget to enjoy the breath we're taking today. Solomon realized that all the gold in Israel couldn't buy him a single moment of genuine peace if he wasn't content in his heart. He built the tallest towers in the world, only to find out they were empty inside. But even with all this insight, Solomon still couldn't stop himself. He had a dark secret, a hunger that wisdom couldn't satisfy and that gold couldn't fill. He was about to break the most dangerous rules a king could break, and it all started with a number that we still associate with pure evil today. Let's talk about the number 666, and why Solomon's bank account became the very thing that led to his downfall. But here is where the story gets really dark, and I want you to pay close attention to this specific number, because it's a massive red flag that most people just skim over when they read the Bible. The Bible says that every single year, Solomon received exactly 666 talents of gold. Now, if you've ever read the book of Revelation, that number, 666, immediately makes your hair stand up. It's the number of the beast. It's a symbol of ultimate corruption. But why is it here in the middle of Solomon's golden age? It's because Solomon was starting to value the gift more than the giver. He was crossing a line that God had clearly drawn centuries before. You see, long before there was ever a king in Israel, God gave a specific manual for how a future king should rule. It was like a survival guide for the soul. God told the kings three very specific things they must never do. Don't multiply horses for yourself, don't multiply silver and gold, and don't multiply wives. And Solomon? He was currently batting 0 for 3. He didn't just have gold. He had so much of it that the Bible says silver was considered as common as stones in Jerusalem. He didn't just have horses. He had an army of 12,000 horsemen and 1,400 chariots, many of which he imported directly from Egypt, the very place God told them never to return to. Now just think about that for a second. Why would the wealthiest, wisest man on earth need more gold? Why did he need a massive army of 12,000 horsemen when he was already at peace and protected by God? This is where modern psychology gives us a chilling answer. It's a concept called the Hedonic Treadmill. Imagine a treadmill at the gym. You're running toward a goal, let's call it happiness. You think, if I just get that promotion, if I just hit 100,000 subscribers, if I just buy that house, I'll finally be happy. And for a moment, you get there. You step on the platform, and your brain gives you a massive hit of dopamine. You feel incredible. But then, something tricky happens. Your brain resets. It creates a new normal. Suddenly, the house doesn't feel big enough. The subscribers don't feel like enough. To get that same high again, you have to turn up the speed. You need twice the money. You need a bigger house. You're running faster and faster, but you're still in the same place emotionally. You're exhausted, you're burnt out, and you're wondering why you still feel empty. Solomon was the ultimate lab rat for this experiment. He was the first human to ever reach the absolute top of the treadmill. He had reached a point where gold was literally everywhere, but it wasn't enough. It's never enough. He was chasing a ghost that kept moving the finish line further and further away. We do the exact same thing today. We scroll through Instagram, looking at people who seem to have it all, and we think, if I just had their life, I'd be set. But Solomon is screaming at us from 3,000 years ago saying, I had that life. I had the gold, the respect, and the power, and it didn't work. Solomon was violating God's rules because he had become addicted to the chase. He started seeing the gold not as a tool to help his people, but as his identity. And here is the warning Solomon leaves us in Ecclesiastes. When you make your net worth your self-worth, you are stepping into a trap. He calls it an evil affliction. You spend your whole life working for stuff you can't take with you, and in the process, God doesn't even give you the power to enjoy what you already have. Have you ever met someone who is incredibly wealthy, but also incredibly miserable? That's the hedonic treadmill. They're running at 10 miles per hour just to feel okay. Solomon had already broken the first two commands. He was rich beyond measure and powerful beyond belief. But it was the third command, the one he thought was just a private matter, that finally shattered his heart and his kingdom. He thought he was wise enough to play with fire and not get burned. He thought he could handle his desires, but he was about to meet 1,000 reasons why he was dead wrong. And it all started with a harmless political treaty. But here's where the story takes its most tragic turn. And I want you to listen closely, because this is where the wisest man to ever live becomes the greatest warning in history. Solomon had everything: wisdom, wealth, and power. But he had a hole in his heart that none of those things could fill. The Bible says he loved many foreign women, 1,000 to be exact. He had 700 wives and 300 concubines. Now, don't get me wrong, most people look at this and think it's just a story about a guy who couldn't control his lust. But it was much deeper and much darker than that. There's a painful paradox here. Why would the man who literally received his brain from God do something so incredibly stupid? I mean, he was the one who wrote the Proverbs warning young men about the traps of the heart. Yet here he was, walking straight into the fire. There's an insight here that I think applies to so many of us who feel like we're too smart for our own good. You see, there's an agonizing burden that comes with being a genius. Imagine you have a super microscope for a brain. You see every crack, every bit of decay, and every injustice in the world more clearly than anyone else. That was Solomon's reality. When you're that smart, it's easy to fall into a state of nihilism, the belief that everything is fundamentally meaningless. When you feel like everything is just smoke, you start looking for something, anything, to make you feel alive. For Solomon, that was women and power. He wasn't marrying 1,000 women because he loved them. He was trying to use quantity to fill a void of quality in his soul. It's like trying to fill a bottomless pit with sand. No matter how much you throw in, you're still staring into the dark. And here's the crazy part. To please these women, Solomon did the unthinkable. He built shrines to their gods. These weren't just different religions. These were cults that practiced some of the most horrific rituals imaginable. He worshipped Ashtoreth, which glorified the indulgence of the flesh. But it got worse. He built a high place for Chemosh and Molech. These gods demanded the ritual sacrifice of children. The Bible says Solomon's heart was turned away from the God who had appeared to him twice. The man who built the great temple for the Creator was now standing on a hill, watching the smoke rise from altars where blood was being spilled in the name of false hope. This is what happens when you have a super wisdom brain, but a hollow heart. You become a prisoner of your own intellect. You think you're wise enough to handle the poison, but the poison doesn't care how smart you are. But there's a final twist that really shows how smoke life can be. Remember Solomon's first act as king? He made a treaty with the Pharaoh of Egypt and married his daughter. He thought he was being a genius politician. He thought that by marrying into the royal family of the most powerful nation on earth, he was securing peace forever. But look at how it ended. The same nation he trusted, the same family he married into, became the #1 supporter of his enemies. When rebels rose up against Solomon, where did they go for help? Egypt. The very thing Solomon built his security on was the very thing that betrayed him. God eventually told Solomon, "Since you have done this, I will surely tear the kingdom away from you." Solomon spent 40 years building a legacy, and in a single generation of disobedience, it was all set to collapse. When Solomon reached the end of his life, he was a broken man. He was the wealthiest man in history, yet he hated his life. He was the wisest man in history, yet he felt like a fool. He was surrounded by 1,000 women, yet he was more alone than he had ever been. It's a haunting image, isn't it? A king sitting on a throne of ivory and gold, staring out at a kingdom that is about to burn, realizing that he spent his entire life chasing the wind. But even in this darkness, Solomon left us one final secret. It's the conclusion to his entire life's work. And if you've been feeling lost or empty or like you're just running in place, you need to hear these final words. Because they are the only thing that can pull you out of the smoke and back onto solid ground. If you're watching this with a heavy heart, feeling like everything is slipping through your fingers, Solomon felt that too. But if life is smoke, it's not a reason to despair, it's a reason to let go. Smoke is beautiful because it's fleeting. You don't need to be great to have value. You just need to accept the mist and find peace in the breath you have right now. The final secret, the conclusion of the whole matter, is this: fear God and keep His commandments, for this is man's all. This isn't about being terrified, it's about finally finding solid ground in a world of vapor. It's realizing that while your status and your bank account will vanish like a breath, your connection to the eternal is the only thing that stays. Everything you do under the sun will eventually be forgotten, but everything you do for God is a treasure stored in heaven that lasts forever. Stop exhausting yourself chasing the vanity of more. Start living for the only thing that doesn't disappear when the smoke clears. Choose eternity. If you're ready to find that lasting purpose, click here to see the story of someone who was even wiser than Solomon and gave everything up just to follow the truth.